wrapping SEAL Team 6 in the odd things that made it more functional and different than other SEALs. And it changes all the time. And the next step after I left that is after Admiral H. Lyon said that the U.S. Navy, in its general scope, has a broad missions. Every sailor in the Navy is charged with anti-terrorism. No training for it, but you see something wrong, you report it. But there was no program where they could train or experience what a bad guy's going to do, what a terrorist is going to do. So after I left 6, I went back up to Washington under a cloud of gloom and started SEAL Red Cell, which was out of the Pentagon. And I hired 8 prior SEAL Team 6 guys to come up and work with me. And so those of us that were chasing terrorists for over 2 years were now going to be the terrorists. So what the mission of that was, and we had to stay trained and equipped. So we had MP5s and we had parachutes, and we maintained our SEAL calls. But what we would do is a 4-star in the Pentagon would coordinate with the Navy 4-star, either in Pacific or Europe, and say, what sites do you want to test to make sure they're ready for terrorism? And then we would announce ahead of time, we're coming, we're coming. And I would normally give a briefing of what goes on. And for 7 to 9 days, we would hit the installation or installations. Like Norfolk, Virginia has a war college there, it has aviation there, it has the ports there, it has submarines, it has ships. So you have multiple targets that you can, but they're all in the same complex. So what normally happens, the Navy has a program that before you deploy, they have to do so many exercises. Well, I'm coming, okay, check that one off. This was dynamic in that we were there and hammered them, and to make sure that the target didn't say, well, I could have stopped you, but I didn't. It wouldn't happen on Tuesdays, only on Thursdays. I hired a civilian company that recorded us penetrating and doing the takedowns and showing how they reacted. And I hired another civilian company that did the analytics that would look at the data and look at the probs and stats that would have happened in real world, and I'd have been that successful as the bad guy. So the Navy now is spending money for me to go embarrass other people by breaking in and showing them their vulnerabilities. And it was not, we did not do it. We did it at the level of expertise the terrorists in that region had. So it wasn't trying to find more technical tools. Did we go into cyber warfare? We didn't, probably never went any higher than what a good second story man does in New York City, how he breaks in to get into nuclear facilities, onboard nuclear submarines, into hospitals and raising havoc, going through the basements of command centers and coming up elevators through the back shaft, and not just raising havoc, but documenting it and presenting it so that the security force, after we're gone, could study and look at it and say, well, these are the kind of things we have to worry about. Well, needless to say, it embarrassed a lot of things in the overall Navy structure. Little command and control things. A hospital does not report to the CO of the base. Reports back to Bethesda, Maryland. The aviation group does not report to the CO of the base. Reports back to his air wing in the Pacific or Atlantic or Europe. So I call that, the Admiral called it, stovepipe commands. And these commands went someplace else, and the base CO he owned the territory, but he couldn't tell them what to do. So actually ended up changing rules that during a terrorist event, the base CO has the power to give orders to do it. But it was just hard nut trying to convince people that the bad guys can do this. Of course, I'll defend the base CO. I hate doing that. In that, he's got instructions that high that says you're going to be an ambassador with the people on the street. You're going to invite people in to share your facilities. You're going to be a diplomat with everybody around you, with the civilians outside. Well, you can't do that and also have a defensive nature and protect a lot of things. So there were more instructions, i.e., we want to have base beautification. So they plant trees by the fence line. Well, the trees grown by the fence line make it easier for me to climb the tree to get over the fence. I mean, it's just a whole dumber things. Lighting. They put lighting up around the base for safety, public safety, not defensive, where I can see the bad guys coming in. So there's a whole shift in mentality when you attack an installation that's never had a combat thought in their brain. It's just been don't steal off my loading docks, and don't park illegally, and don't speed here, to I'm going to come over and get you. And most CEOs, besides the problems of the instructions, would say, well, when's the last time somebody came and got me? That's not the point. I mean, a little erosion, so you have fences, but you can crawl underneath. People say that, well, I have 2 layers of link fence. Well, and low light level TV. You look behind the camera, Nick. Unless you line up exactly, you're not going to see. Because if I shift, the prisms, you're going to find those holes get smaller and smaller. So a low light level TV could see me if they knew what they were looking at. If they had to have the ideal angle. And if I move fast. If you move fast, the eye catches that, and then you start looking closer. If you move slow, even though the lights are on, sometimes I'd say, damn, I'm crawling through this stuff and the stadium lights are on. And you get right up to the door. Or you dumb things, you got a guard in the tower, he's only got 20 rounds with him. Because out of those 20 rounds, you got to come down the ladder, go back inside and get some more. Well, not going to work. You get numbers on the fences. So you're framed 42 or section 42, 43. On the outside, they change the signs. And they get all screwed up where they respond to. If they have sensors, you just get a long fishing pole or a bamboo pole with a flag on it and get in there and get the sensors going and pull it back. Well, about the 3rd time they came out there, they realize it's an error rate, and you put it in the log to have the techie check it in the morning. But they're not going to respond to 46 again if they're running dogs. If they're running dogs on the inside, get a bitch in heat, swab some diapers and tie them on her, throw her over the fence. Now, where do you think the dogs are going? Not going to worry about me. And if they are, pepper spray in my cuffs, down my boots and the bottom of my pants, pepper spray. They'll lose their nose for about 25 minutes. So, I mean, it was common sense things for me, but just people don't think that way. And that's what Red Cell was about, is to demonstrate that at that rude and crude level, you could get in to steal a nuke. Now, maybe you didn't know how to take a nuke out, but you could do that. I mean, I actually got on board nuclear submarines in New London, Connecticut. Well, if I put a gun to somebody in a cruise and drive it out of here, you could drive it out of here and launch missiles back in against the United States. Even easier, there's a railroad bridge that goes, they have to go over a Highway 95 bridge and a railroad bridge, the nuclear submarines go out. Well, if I dropped the choo-choo train bridge, the submarines aren't going out anywhere until they clear the river. And, you know, you end up with that same area. There's a ship tender that takes care of the nuclear weapons. That's on one side of those bridges, and the nuclear weapon and the nuclear submarines are inland. But where the tender is, state police control. The state police, it's called State Pier, so they patrol the pier. It's not their ship; they don't care. And there's railroad tracks come down there, so you have railroad dicks that do part of it. Well, you have zones of responsibility, so the different police actions, the law enforcement officials figure that guy's got it, I don't. So you just play them against each other. So, you know, that was just so easy to do. When Ronald Reagan was president, and he used to go to the ranch. Well,
Hello there, my name's Sam Fisher, and what you've just been watching is, well, the voice is the voice of a gentleman by the name of Dick Marcinko, who was, up until I think 2018, he was the founder of SEAL Team 6 in the US Special Forces. He was also the founder and instrumental sort of creator of red cells, the idea of red cells, spec ops red cells. What you were seeing in the background was, though he never really stated implicitly, was what he basically based the red cell concept on, which was an old NATO program called Operation Gladio. Now, because this is the first actual sort of full episode of this series of called Media, Mindspace and Manipulation, because of the nature of the subject matter, I want to give you a good idea of my background before we get started, so then you know that I'm not some CIA asset trying to confuse you all or anything like that. But I do have experience with the intelligence world, so to speak. I've been so my name's Samuel N. Fisher, Sam Fisher. That is my real name. I was born before the eponymous lead character of Splinter Cell. I've taught him everything he knows. That's it. Being fictional. And for 33 years I've been a researcher for the truth. Yeah? There's only really ever one subject. Well, all of us that are in this game is actually looking into, be like UFOs to paranormal to everything. There's only ever one subject, and that one subject is the truth. It basically encompasses everything, because this research is multifaceted and multidisciplined. And you learn that usually after a good few years of doing this. If you're truly seeking the truth, you'll be looking into all sorts. I'm also an author. I'm currently writing in my own name, but I used to be a ghostwriter from 2007 to 2017. I specialised in autobiographies and memoir, basically writing the autobiographies for someone else. who then took on my work and put their name on it. I was extremely lucky, basically, to get the types of jobs that I did and to be able to make a living from it because of the clients that I had, and that was through a family friend. He was a good friend of my great uncle. He's sadly no longer with us. But through him, I was basically writing books on behalf of, shall we say, international bankers, CEOs of a few global corporations, politicians, varying nations, military personnel, quite high ranking, spec ops as well, of various nations, and also intelligence. Now, because of the nature of my work, that's all I'm going to tell you, and all I'm able to tell you contractually. I can't tell you what I worked on, who they were, what we talked about, so I'll never talk about that. But it's just to give you an idea of how I came across this subject, so to speak. This was just a chance meeting with a former client friend of mine who I've been looking at media manipulation in general for a while. I was planning on just doing manipulation by the media anyway. That was all I was going to focus on because of what's happened with Russell Brand and everything else. Certain things that I basically have a foundation degree in journalism and media and video production, believe it or not. So I have a good idea of how these things sort of operate. But this chance meeting, which was off the record basically, which means that any information you get you can't actually use. Yeah? You can't divulge your names, you can't do anything. You can't, well, by use it I mean as in make any of it public, talk about it publicly, talk about it with anyone else even, or publish it. But you can act on it to use it as a lead, so to speak, to lead somewhere else. Which is what I did. It led me to red cells. And that was eye-opening. Red cells is what we're going to talk about today. Because it started off, it's a bizarre situation. Because I've not seen this guy for a long time. A long time, and then the week Maui happened, I got a phone call from him. I'd just come into something. I got a phone call from him whilst I was looking for somewhere to go on holiday, basically, to the family. And he said, "Come stay with me for a bit." So I'm like, "Oh, okay." Anyway, Maui happened. And I'm doing a sort of brief but slightly heated exchange when we found out what was going on in Maui. I was saying people are thinking it's a DEW and everything else. He turned around and said, "No, thermobaric mist." What? Thermobaric what thing? Thermobaric mist. It's a bit like napalm. Only hangs around in mist form. He said either that or it could be metal dust, which is another thing. He said check the thermobaric mist first. Just have a look. Anyway, that opened up a whole can of worms, it really did. It also lost me a friend during that time, unfortunately. I wasn't entirely sure whether I could actually talk about what this other friend told me about. He was a good friend on Telegram, and unfortunately I said something out of hand during the conversation that he had, and in trying to explain myself I kind of knackered things up. So I saw a rabbit leader. He was pushing for information though, and when that happened I get a bit cagey, you know what I mean? Paranoia hits. So I saw your rabbit leader, but they blocked me, so bollocks to you. Anyway, basically from that sort of information exchange, shall we say, that we went through before I came home, I knew I could trust the guy. So this red cell's lead, I thought, right, go on, we'll take a look. I'd heard the term red cell before, but it was to do with a document, a WikiLeaks document, a CIA leak, should I say. And it was basically just talking about politics in Europe to do with the Afghan war and how to steer the sort of the people into accepting the war a lot more than they were. So red cell, I thought that's what it was about. No. See, these guys were extremely highly trained spec ops soldiers. Yeah? Extremely highly trained. When Dick Marcinko set up red cell, he actually picked them, all of his personnel, handpicked them from not only SEAL Team 6, which is probably the most elite sort of special forces unit in the US, second or third in the world, but he also picked them from other SEAL teams and from the Rangers as well. There was a gentleman whose name I've forgotten, I'll put it across the bottom, who you saw in the prologue video to this, who was actually part of one of those red cell units. And these were, he originally started off as just being trained to think like the enemy for sort of wargaming, tabletop wargaming sort of things that the army do a lot. But then Dick realised it could be used in other ways. One of them being testing the security of their own bases. It's quite a good idea. Yeah, so that's what they were doing for a long time. But there was something that gentleman said in that last video, and it was ringing through my head for ages. It just kept on ringing and kept on ringing and kept on ringing. And it was when he was talking about 9/11, and they were all on leading up to 9/11. Yeah, he said that they were following generals about. They'd all been given targets, and they were meant to follow them around and take a photo. And if they got a photo of them, then that counted as a sniper kill. And what they would then do is they would set a date where they would all attack a different base at once. Yeah. Get into where this gentleman is, showing the pictures. This is where we shot you. This is where we shot you. This is where we shot you. Yeah. So we get them to think, basically, to up their security. But 9/11 happened, and he got called back. Now he'd never met anyone else in the whole team, the whole crew. Yeah. Never. Apart from this one day. And he said there were about 40 people in this room, in this motel room where they all had to go and meet up. And they were all told that, you know, the operation was off and blah 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 blah. Now, yes, they want to call everyone back, right? They want to find out where everyone is. They want to find out who's missing, more specifically. This was probably the first time, I think, that the US had used one of their red cells against themselves. They were all highly compartmentalised, yeah? So even their leaders, yeah, and their sort of squad commanders and everything else wouldn't know exactly what they were doing. I truly believe that 9/11 was one of those, was an event that was done by the US on itself. I can't 100% prove that, but with little sort of bits and bats here and there, I'm sort of piecing a picture together. Anyway, this led me to look at Gladio, because Gladio's been confused with red cells quite a lot recently. The Gladio program, though it was exposed in 1979 in Italy due to the P2 organisation that was essentially tasked by the US to cause chaos. Yeah. This was the reason for Gladio was being set up, right? Let's start at the beginning. It was set up by the US and Britain, specifically MI6 and the OSS, in partnership with the Vatican and the Mafia. And it also employed fascist units, well, fascist sort of sympathisers still active in Italy after the war. And this was to fight fascism. Right? I know, sounds counterproductive, doesn't it? Yeah? Get fascists to fight fascism. But they're kind of there as a cover, a smoke screen. Oh look, they're a fascist, non-fascist. Obviously they're terrorists and evil, it's not us. Yeah? They were called at first stay-at-home brigades. Yeah? And essentially the Mafia would hide weapon stashes all over Italy, which is where it started. And because of the prevalence of Catholicism in Italy in general, there was a Catholic priest at least knew enough in every block all over Italy, basically, yeah, in the towns and cities. So there was a rich. One thing that has been said about the Vatican, right, or about the Catholic Church, it is probably the most widespread and densest populated intelligence service, yeah, that you can find. It's a Catholic priesthood by the intelligence service. Well, confession, obviously. Yeah? They know information on everybody. Yeah? None of you seen The Godfather? Idiots. Anyway, so yeah, this is why the Vatican was used, basically. The Vatican Bank was set up at the same time, so they could funnel money through to fund them all, through drugs and everything else. And then, like I said, this was all going fine. They used them to instigate a coup in Turkey, which is this. So after that operation, done against Turkey, it then became apparent that they could probably spread this out all over Europe, which is what they did. Every single city and nation across the European continent has a Gladio cell. You know, this is when it became Gladio, yeah, rather than just stay-at-home brigades, because it needed a wider sort of operational hierarchy and bureaucracy at the top. So you have people like David Rockefeller involved, Henry Kissinger, everything else. Yeah. The Pentagon. Whilst Dick was talking, you would have seen the names that were involved, the Gladio going past. One thing you need to understand about this whole thing is that it is purely a US and UK intelligence-led device and operation. All of these things are. When you start talking about Mossad and everything else, trying to link the Jewish people into it, yeah, or to make them the actual leaders of this whole thing. Jesus. I've said this countless times, the Jewish people, just like Hamas and the entire Muslim world, are unwitting tools a lot of the time for these intelligence agencies. Very powerful, very rich, shall we say, and well-off intelligence services. Now, P2 was an offshoot of the Mafia. There was also a branch of the Freemasons, yeah, in Italy. They were basically a Freemasonic order of mafia wise guys. And you use their connections through that to do intelligence, essentially, on people that would pose a threat to US interests, which just happened to be a couple of politicians and quite a few reporters that they killed. And when this came out, it blew up, really did. And it's been one of the most, along with the DX plot in Germany, which I also went into last time, this has been one of the most covered up court cases there has ever been in the Western world. Nowadays it's quite a lot easier to get information on Gladio than it used to be. There's been quite a few books written on it. Very credible books, very credible documents, some of which you should have been seeing in the background. Because they were essentially FOI documents from the US State Department, which are unusually forthcoming with these kind of documents, unlike the British. Yeah, I've tried an FOI request with the British and it's just not, well, the British government, they're not all too willing, really, for some reason. Anyway, so yeah, this is what Dick Marcinko based the red cells on. Now, over the years, especially after 9/11, the intelligence services have been using native Muslim peoples or native peoples of particular countries to act as militias or act as terrorists, for them. These terrorist organisations that seem to pop up all over the place aren't organic, right? They are essentially led by not intelligence assets but actual intelligence agents. A good example of this, I mean, they were doing this before 9/11, right? And this is where this example comes from. This was essentially a Turkish national that built the bomb that was used, well, built one of the bombs that was going to be used in the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993. And many of you are going, what, first? Yeah, it was bombed twice. The first time, they blew up the basement, all 10 floors of the car park, basement car park. One of the gentlemen that was building the bombs for them and that was being persuaded to essentially become a suicide bomber for it, recorded himself as he was being persuaded into doing this, not by what he believed to be people with the same sort of mindset as him. He sort of worked out himself that these were actually FBI agents that were coercing him into doing this act, and recorded them doing it and then handed himself in. This created a national scandal, obviously. I'm telling you this because this gives you an idea of where I'm going to be going with this video, right? Now, during the 80s, the CIA settled the Mujahideen, right, in Afghanistan. This was when the Russians occupied Afghanistan before we, as in the Americans and British, went in the 2000s. The CIA and MI6 trained the Mujahideen, right, through a very wealthy benefactor called Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden, from that date, became one of the highest paid mercenaries that the US used. Yeah? He was what was known as a wet worker, an assassin. The bombings that he did a lot of the time were assassinations for the US and UK intelligence services. And when the US needed some sort of scapegoat or someone to blame, or a terrorist organisation to blame 9/11 on, I don't think they actually informed bin Laden before they blamed him for it, because for a good long while people forget this. Osama bin Laden sort of swore blindly he didn't do it. Right? It wasn't me, guys. What do you mean? Blah blah blah. What do you mean? Not even a week before, right? Everyone's going on about how bin Laden was so hard to find, right, after the 9/11 attacks. Yet, not like I said, not only a week before, a CNN crew, an American CNN crew, found him quite early. Not sat in a cave somewhere, no, compound or anything like that, right? No. Sat in a village, in a house, with his wife. Does this sound like a terrorist leader to you? Yeah? I think by this time bin Laden had probably retired. And in many ways, the intelligence services needed to get rid of him, and an excuse to get rid of him. And couple that with the fact that they needed to enter the vaults in Building 6 to clear the names of the Bushes and the Clintons and everyone else. They also needed to do all sorts of other things, get rid of the books, in the digitised books in the CIA building in Building 7, destroy the accounting floor, or the accounting wing in the Pentagon. Also, so many different things were going on that day, right? "9/11" was one of those events that you can't pin a single sort of reason or event or faction or anything being solely in control. It was sort of a everyone piling job, yeah? But red cells were used a heck of a lot all the way through that entire event. same with 777. And we know this because of they had kind of the same sort of telltale signs. The same little telltale signs that ran throughout, yeah, each of these attacks. One of them, the most noticeable, was the passports, Middle Eastern passports, right? Now the 9/11 ones, they didn't really do their intel too well, yeah, and the Middle Eastern guys are still alive. It shows. But the 7/7 ones weren't, obviously. I think they'd learnt by then to fake them, yeah? Fake the Middle Easternness of them, because this is something the DX plot showed us, was that these people, despite not even looking Middle Eastern, right? When you were studying from them, just looking at them, yeah, they didn't look the slightest bit Middle Eastern. Even though they said a couple of the guys were from Germany, they obviously weren't, right? But they had fake Syrian passports ready, and these would have been dropped somewhere after they'd done whatever it was they were going to do, yeah, whatever bombing they were going to do. Al-Qaeda became the first mercenary cell to be used to give the appearance of a war, right? Or a war in action. And to stir up the sorts of the Afghan people to try and join the Taliban, join their ranks, and then keep the war going, because the Taliban are also run by the government, yeah, the US government and the British government. Same deal in Libya, yeah? Same thing with Libya. Again, we know that there were countless US and UK intelligence and spec ops assets all over Libya before the uprising that eventually started the war that killed Gaddafi. Yeah, remember the embassy when that was attacked? Well, spec ops soldiers got there pretty damn quick, didn't they? Yeah, a lot of them died. What were they doing on the ground there already? No one questions that. Again, red cells being used in that area quite a bit to basically instigate a rebellion. Same thing in Syria. What started the Syrian civil war, yeah? The PKK, who were Kurdish militants apparently, are all MI6. Yeah, they're all set up by MI6. ISIS doesn't exist. Yeah? The organisation that everyone knows as ISIS doesn't exist. Never has. This document here.
Load of 500-pound bombs on the base. Drove it down next to Air Force One. Parked on a tarmac. And booby-trapped it. And then somebody got curious about it, and EOD went down and found the booby trap. But they missed the second one. So when they went and jumped in the cab, it would have detonated, and Air Force One would have gone down the runway looking like crumpled plane. So it was just, you know, and this playing Chester child molester, just getting them upset where everybody was running. When we did any installation, we would just do a penetration and see who reacts, and then so they were small hits, and every night or every hit got a little harder, a little deeper, and we'd go to a back gate and put our lock on it. So if they caught us, we'd race for the back gate, and they'd have a smile on their face saying, "You're not getting out that back gate." Well, we had our own, we done lock, and then they couldn't get out without block cutters to cut and chase us. So it was just a program that embarrassed a lot of people, and they took it the wrong way. I mean, rather than saying, we need to tighten up and fix these things, they felt it was unfair to do those, to highlight those kind of things. And then the Navy was paying about $3 million a year to fly us everywhere, and our equipment and our explosives and all that stuff. But so eventually it reduced itself to almost a staff operation, and not the physical. Here's the picture, what's going on. Here's what you could have done. So that's disappeared. So the bad guys can do whatever they want now. CIA paper called The Art of Darkness,
And it's their pretty much admission that they set up ISIS as a fictional entity to blame on terrorist actions that they were doing themselves in order to subjugate and control a large population of people. Al-Baghdadi is a bogeyman. It doesn't exist. Never has. Yeah? Or didn't exist, should I say, because apparently he was killed in 2020. But then, how did he die in 2017 then? What about in 2016? How did he die in 2016? End of 2014, he also died at the end of 2014 as well. How can a guy die 4 times? Yeah. Obviously, resurrection isn't as hard as we think. Yeah. Judging by al-Baghdadi. What's even better is that his deputy, right, that Biden supposedly killed last year, died in 2017 as well. What they basically did was they took a photo of a guy. This time they got a Middle Eastern guy who actually looked Middle Eastern but turned out to be a Mossad agent. Yeah? They took his photo and then plastered it around as being the leader of this terrorist organisation that was attacking their own, you know, all these people in Syria and in Iraq and Egypt, everywhere. The thing is, like I said, never existed. Very often the people carrying out these terrorist actions weren't even Middle Eastern. Like, for those kind of operations they used actual, again, red cells, spec ops, yeah, our own spec ops, to ensure that these actions went ahead and went through smoothly. You have to remember that these mercenaries, although very battle hardened, aren't all that well trained. Things with them go wrong a lot. Which also works to their advantage, to the British and US's advantage, because then they can show that they've caught them doing it or they foiled it in some way. Now, the deeper you go, you start to understand that you follow the money, and Hezbollah are the same in Lebanon. Hezbollah are a militant force that, although not officially sanctioned by the Lebanese government, do act as a sort of militia and army for them, yeah, and also on behalf of Iran as well. But they're funded by the US and the UK, yeah, and funded through Iran and Israel. Yes, Israel passes them money to blow them up. Yeah? The same is true of Hamas as well. Basically, Hamas was set up because Mahmoud Abbas, who's the Palestinian Authority leader in the West Bank, was getting too popular, and the Gazan people were unifying and joining forces with Abbas. So in order to split them down the middle, they needed an opposing force in steps, specially trained intelligence officers from MI6 and from the CIA, who start posing as the Hamas leadership and still are to this day. Hamas is purely there to, in some part it was there, like I said, to split the sort of like Gazan people down the middle, which it did very well. It's now there to justify the actual money that comes into Israel to protect it from Hamas, which is why you get all these things like Iron Dome and all sorts of other things. And to keep tension there high. Because the last thing the US government wants, and the UK government wants, is a unified Muslim world. All getting paid different amounts for the same oil. If you had a unified Middle East, they'd all charge the same. They'd also cut the US out as a middleman, which is happening anyway. So, this is why Hamas are so media savvy, so up on their intelligence. And why they're being used right now. Now, how does all this tie into the mainstream media and everything else? Well, this ties all together through their use of military psychological warfare units, which is going to be the subject of the next episode. So, likewise, like, share, subscribe. No drill. I'll see you next time.